In this 8th episode, we compare similar books and their authors. Several notable authors have either had a peak experience or studied them in depth, and their work is significant. Scientific authors have also made seminal contributions to their respective fields. However, each of these experts is limited in their scope of vision regarding the integrated theory of consciousness. That's why it, along with Genesis 3.0, is so groundbreaking, because they are the first to combine all of this information into one book. What are some of the books, or who are some of the authors who correlate with the book?
There aren't too many that compare closely, but of the over 100 books that I've studied, there are bits and pieces from virtually all of them which accumulatively together are in the integrated theory of consciousness, which is the forerunner of Genesis 3.0. So I do a lot of quoting of what others have said because they are well renowned in their field, and I think it gives greater validation to what I'm saying by taking information from other people who have been looking into the same things that I've been studying and working with for the last 40 plus years. And so that's really how I've got most of the book written. Again, it's a reflection of a myriad of different people adding and contributing to the way that Genesis 3.0 is stated. Let me go back to the first book that correlates very closely to my book. It was written in 1905 by Richard Maurice Book. He was an MD, and he had what was obviously a peak experience as described by Abraham Maslow. He reached a state of superconsciousness, which he describes and correlates very closely with what I would describe. And he also recognizes others at that time who he also believes had a superconsciousness or peak experience.
In which book is this? What is the title?
The title of it is Cosmic Consciousness.
Okay.
And it's been republished. It was republished in 2010 as an update because it was considered such an important book that 105 years later, when the book was first published, to the second publishing, or when it was republished, let's say.
You mentioned Maslow.
Yeah.
Which of his books?
Oh, gosh.
And Maslow's the 70s.
60s and 70s, yeah. That was when he was doing the study of peak experience. And I think he was more comprehensive in his study of peak experience than anyone else. Others have come along, I can't remember his first name, last name, Galperin, who had a peak experience. He was a psychologist as well, and he also then studied peak experience and came up with virtually the same kind of explanation that Abraham Maslow did.
So which one of Maslow's books covers this the best, or do all of his books do an equal job with covering this and compare to what you've written?
All of the books that are read by Maslow apply very closely to what I've written. And again, what he described was virtually a perfect description of what I experienced. The two books that he wrote that I would include is The Farther Reaches of Human Nature and Religious Values and Peak Experience. And others have studied peak experience and have given similar descriptions, in some cases more comprehensive. Charles Tart, for instance, had studied peak experience, and so did Stanislav Grof.
So what are some of the books that you use that compare the most to what is in Genesis?
Well, one that just came out 30 days ago in June of 2025 by Michael Egnor. He's an MD neurosurgeon. Uh, he writes information in his book which is really quite parallel to what I've got in my book. Uh, and again, I think we validate each other because we've come to same or similar conclusions about virtually everything. So uh, I would think that anyone interested in this subject um, would like to read his book. But there are others too, which I think would be helpful. Books by Greg Braden, who is a geologist, um, has had transformative experiences. He's written multiple books about his experiences and the information that he has been able to uh, coagulate together. And several have been on the New York Times bestseller list. I would specifically um, suggest Divine Matrix, which is the name of the book, but it's also the name of the concept that he is expressing. And he also has um, a series of lectures on that you can get on the internet, um, referred to as the missing links. There are, I think, 42 lectures, about 30 minutes apiece, and they are really very outstanding. I think they correlate very closely to everything that I've written about, and so that's another source that somebody might use to further study the concepts that I've been writing about. And even Alexander, he had a near-death experience, and as he has described his experience, it really overlaps closely with superconsciousness states like peak experience. There are more similarities than difference, and they're really close cousins.
Okay, what about my big theory of everything, my big toe? What about that?
Okay, that correlates quite closely with what's in my book. Uh, my big toe, 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 stands for theory of everything. And so it's really my big theory of everything. But the author speaks, talks about many things that I talk about in similar fashion. And I think that the conclusions that he has come to are very similar to mine.
Okay, so how does Genesis 3.0 better explain the concepts that Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, Abraham Maslow, Irvin Laszlo, and Eben Alexander and others, what they've written? How does Genesis differ from all of these other authors? What sets Genesis apart?
Well, when you're speaking about consciousness, intelligence, uh, it would be more comprehensive. The things they are writing about are parallel to a lot of the things that are in my book, but they're not all inclusive relative to what's in my book. I talk about other things that they don't address that to me are part of the reality that science is now catching up to, but hasn't quite reached the pinnacle of it in their ability to understand. For instance, science physicists in particular would say everything in the universe can be described by the four properties of matter, energy, space, time. And I say that there's more to it than that. Consciousness, intelligence, they would say, is manufactured by what's happening in the brain, the electrical chemical events that are occurring within the brain manufacture consciousness. I would say, I'm sorry, that's not comprehensive enough. You have to really think of consciousness and intelligence as two additional properties. So there are six properties, uh, with consciousness and intelligence being a primary property of the universe, like matter, energy, space, time. So, whereas science would say there are four properties, I would say no, there's six, because consciousness, intelligence are two additional properties that must be included in the, if you're describing all of the properties of the universe which make up our reality.
So why did you wait till now to write Genesis 3.0?
I originally wrote Integrated Theory of Intelligence back first published in 1986. And I had no doubt in my mind at that time that this was so far ahead of anything that science could even deal with that it would be either severely criticized or entirely ignored. And it has taken all this many years up until now for science to catch up, but it is. And there are now quite a few scientists who are coming to the same level of understanding that I first wrote 44 years ago. I knew way back when I first wrote the first book that eventually I would have to write more, but there was no sense in writing it then because nobody was going to really pay any attention to my first book. And so now enough time has passed and more scientists have come to the similar understanding on many things that I wrote about back then that I thought, oh, okay, I can I can now do this. I better do it now. In 30 days, I'm going to be 87. I don't have a lot of years left. If I'm going to do it, now is the time.